Her purpose was plain. She tried to obscure her misconduct by falsely accusing the defense of racism. Her strategic use of pronouns was neither innocuous or vague. Willis repeatedly used them and they, and linked these terms to her antagonists, which are white male Republicans. Now, McAfee found that the effect of Willis's MLK speech was to cast racial aspersions. He said that Big Fani had a stinky odor of mendacity. Woo! Yeah, I can imagine.
She can't talk. We can't have another dummy as a president.
No.
Okay? We cannot have a dummy.
No, we already had
and the
3.5
people
years.
from Vietnam agree with that.
Fani Willis continues to fight for her very existence on the Trump case. She was excited to be on this case because she was making a bunch of money for her lover, Nathan Wade, who is no longer on the case. He got disqualified after we learned that they were indicting each other all over the world. Places like Belize, Napa Valley, all over Georgia, multiple locations. They had long working lunches together. Don't know if they've desanitized any of those buildings. But Nathan Wade has been disqualified, and Fani is demanding an appeal, saying that the lower level court really should be reversed, that Fani did nothing wrong. She's totally in the right. If she grifted $700,000 off for her lover, well, that's what justice requires. And don't be a racist bigot also, and say her name properly, okay? It's called Fani, not Fanny, okay? Just to be clear, don't want to be racist. So here's what Trump's defense attorney, Steve Sadow, had to say about this when he filed his appellate brief. It says, here's my statement as the lead counsel for President Trump in the Fulton County, Georgia case. It says, President Trump's legal team has filed a reply brief in the Georgia Court of Appeals, persuasively, I'll say, rebutting, and that is like, combating. I know we're talking about Fani, so when we say the word rebut here, I know it's confusing, but it means like pushing back on the state's argument. Now, the brief makes clear that Fani Willis should be disqualified, and this case should be dismissed because of her proven false, incendiary racial rhetoric. Remember, why, God? Why did they choose the black man? The church speech was calculated intentionally to heighten public condemnation of and thereby prejudice Trump and the co-defendants in the eyes of the jurors in Georgia. Such misconduct violated the rules of professional conduct, and therefore, President Trump again calls for the dismissal and the removal of Big Fani Willis, the biggest Fanny in Georgia. She likes Grey Goose and she keeps cash under her mattress. So you know who she is. Don't you forget it. Here is the interlocutory appeal. We're in the middle of the Trump prosecution brought by Big Fani Willis, the biggest Fanny in Fulton County. She submitted this as an appeal, and what we have here is the reply brief from President Donald John Trump. Now, I think both sides are appealing this. Bunch of appeals happening. So we're here reading Trump's reply, and here's what it tells us. When we scroll past the table of contents, we're going to see very meticulously organized. Well done, Mr. Sadow. And this table of authorities looks beautiful as well. We're continuing past those until we get to the beginning, where defense attorney for Donald Trump, Steve Sadow, tells us, all right, listen, Your Honor, Big Fani's argument should be deemed abandoned, okay? It's terrible. She's let it go, like her prosecutor's office and her social life. Says the state's standing argument should be deemed abandoned. We have standing. And alternatively, by the way, Trump was aggrieved by Willis's church speech, and that's a severe violation of Georgia's rules of professional conduct. So we are supposed to be here. Don't say that we don't have standing. Let this case move forward. Trump's defense says, all right, Your Honor, Big Fani's ephemeral reference to standing fails for two reasons. First, she didn't cite any authority, and if there's no local authority, then that's an abandoned argument. She didn't cite her sources, got to do that. And second, Trump was aggrieved by the trial court's failure to disqualify Fani because McAfee's a weenie and suffered adverse personal impact from Willis's church speech. Trump was harmed. Scott McAfee, the judge, knew it, but couldn't do it because he had to get reelected. And they were in the middle of a tense primary season, and lo and behold, he's going to be okay. So a party, they say, has standing, okay, Trump has standing to be here when it has suffered an adverse impact to its own rights. And to have standing, it's when there's a violation of the rules. In this case, it's rules of professional conduct. And that is sufficiently severe here to talk about the need for justice. Now, President Trump has unquestionably substantiated Fani's violation of the rules, her rules of professional conduct, saying the opening brief explained why Willis's speech did not serve a legitimate law enforcement purpose. this. Why she was out there saying, why, God, did they target me and not the white man? Well, because you weren't sleeping with the white man, Fani. And why the language Willis used had a substantial likelihood of heightening public condemnation. Now, the state's response from Fani's office does not even dispute the trial court's finding. Judge McAfee did confirm that the church speech was legally improper. Willis's intention and her intentional injection of false allegations of racism into this high-profile case was undoubtedly severe enough to call into question the fair and efficient administration of justice. Because Fani was bringing a personal component to this, and she had to save her own skin, right? She was not really focused on the interest of justice in the case, more focused on staying on the case, her political future, protecting her lover, Nathan Wade, and other things. Willis's improper allegations of racism, says Trump's defense, are especially pernicious in the administration of justice. Prosecutors shouldn't be doing that. They're supposed to be independent and neutral. Courts recognize that few forms of prejudice are so virulent as being called a racist. It's a big deal. So much so that state and federal courts observe that there are structural implications when a prosecutor appeals to a racial bias, right? If a prosecutor comes out and starts hinting to a jury panel of one color about the defendant who's another color, starts making all these statements and things, huge no-no, right? You can vacate the conviction. The whole thing goes away. Don't even imply it. It's called serious prosecutorial misconduct. Requires the reversal irrespective of the harm. That's how bad it is. Willis used that, exactly. She wrongfully labeled the defendants, Trump, and their attorneys as racists. It's about as severe as it gets. And moreover, Judge, Fani's speech remark that she said that the prosecution of Trump, that she was doing God's work, shattered the presumption of innocence. God's at my back, and I know that we're going to persevere. And it shifted the burden of proof. And it said that basically the other side, I guess, is Satan or the devil. Burden shifting has resulted in plain error. So we start with the presumption of innocence, and if she's going to say she's on God's side, then that means that the other side is clearly guilty already. That inverts the equation. All of this was implicated by Fani's speech, and this is serious enough to call into question her judgment. And pretermitting fairness, Trump was injured by Willis's legally improper speech because the news media took it. And they reported Willis's claim as an attack on the defense. Willis falsely declared that the allegations against her stemmed from racism. She blamed racism. They were true, though. She obviously intended that every potential Fulton County juror who heard or read her racist speech should label the defense as racists. But the state came back and they said, no. Fani wasn't calling you racist. Don't be silly. The interpretation of the speech from the government was that Willis was being vague, and we didn't even know who she was referring to. She could have been talking about anybody, not Trump. That's disingenuous at best. Her purpose was plain. She tried to obscure her misconduct by falsely accusing the defense of racism. Her strategic use of pronouns was neither innocuous or vague. Willis repeatedly used them and they, and linked these terms to her antagonists, which are white male Republicans. The only white male Republicans included in Willis's perception of God's work were President Trump and other defendants, those white male Republicans. Now, contrary to the state's attempt to elevate form over substance, so many others, plural, could not refer only to Roman, which is singular, right? To one person. Well, they were talking to somebody who already took a plea deal, so it didn't matter. Here's what the Washington Post wrote about Big Fani. They said Sunday was the first time Willis had been seen in public since Michael Roman's motion. Kenneth Chesebro took a plea deal. Michael Roman did not. Michael Roman was the person with Ashley Merchant, the co-defendant, who submitted this, really cracked the lid on this whole thing. Shout out to those two. Her appearance at Big Bethel AME as part of a special Sunday service, Willis entered the sanctuary and gave her speech, right? So that's what the Washington Post said. Now, she used these terms as insidious and calculated references to Trump. She knew, Fani knew what she was doing, and she got precisely the reaction she wanted. The media came out, and they were just throwing a fit over this, how happy they were. News was all over the place. The media regurgitated and republished her false and her pernicious subterfuge. She slandered these defendants before the entire nation. And she knew this was going to happen. She calculated this result despite her duty to protect the presumption of innocence. That's her sworn obligation, despite due process, and despite the requirement to provide for a fair trial. Now, this court has held that individuals criticized in grand jury reports suffer injury to personal right, and that applies equally to individuals who are not named directly, but who are a part of a criticized group. And therefore, we have standing. Under any theory, there was a severe violation of the rules of professional conduct. Trump has standing from that as well. Now, there was also forensic misconduct here, Your Honors. Fani's reliance on this case and this dissent is at odds with the precedent that exists in this jurisdiction. They said, let's be clear about this. Fani's comments and her speech and her courtroom behavior, they were flagrant violations of her ethical duties. They were intentionally wielded in direct contravention of the rules of professional conduct. These were presumptively innocent defendants who maintain that presumption, and she did all of this for personal and political gain. If you sidestep these damaging facts to try to do that, the state is trying to narrow the law. It incorrectly restricts Williams, which is another decision, as McAfee did, to reach only comments on the guilt of the accused. So they're misreading this case, says Sadow. Now, according to Fani, so long as it refrains from saying the defendant is guilty, a prosecutor can do anything she wants, no matter how defamatory, unethical, or widely reported it is, because it is a sufficient cure for the harm, because time is a sufficient cure for the harm. The state contends this court is without recourse to punish the prosecutor and just must disregard it, because the case is not going to be happening soon. Well, she can call them racist, but like 6 months are going to go by, and then everybody's going to forget about that. Sadow says, no, that's nonsense. There's 3 problems with this. First, that case and the prior precedent don't require prejudice, don't even need to show that. Even if it were required, the state ignores that they're biased prosecutors, which is pretty clearly prejudice, and the Billings dissent has no persuasive value at all. Justice Billings, in fact, endorsed a pretrial prejudice standard that's easily met here. And so this prior precedent does not require prejudice to disqualify Fani, right? Fani is saying you can only get rid of me if there's a really big problem, if there's prejudice towards the defendant, and there's no prejudice towards the defendant here, no ultimate, real long-term harm to him or the case. And so I can stay on this case. Even if I violated the ethical rules, it doesn't harm him in a prejudicial way. They say, wait, the insistence that disqualification is limited to comments regarding the guilt of the accused or misconduct that prejudices Trump is foreclosed by numerous cases. Sadow is saying the standard is not that high, and he gives us a bunch of cases that explain that. No, it says trial courts may disqualify attorneys for violations of disciplinary rules. It doesn't have to be the higher standard of prejudice. You just violate the rules. Sanctions are appropriate and other things. Neither cases, nor the Williams case, requires prejudice. Williams analyzed the ethical rules and considered the facts and circumstances. Williams then explained that improper prosecutorial statements can create a conflict of interest and can constitute forensic misconduct. Now, first, Williams clarified improper comments can show a personal interest, and that could be a problem, and they may constitute disqualifying misconduct if you look at the motive and the intent behind the statements. Now, Williams did not hold that a trial court is prohibited from or lacks discretion to disqualify prosecutors, not at all. In fact, instead, that case pointed to each factor and said that in that case, they were not so bad that we should disqualify that person. But they could. In that case, they weren't bad enough, but here, they clearly are. The state accepts the finding that Willis's speech was not inadvertent. It was not a mistake. She had it written out. When viewed together, she brought up race. She evinced a calculated plan. She went out and said it specifically. The state argues that, quote, find me the votes, and Willis's slew of other national comments have no connection to Trump. No connection, says Steve Sadow. The connection is Willis's repeated public display of racial animus towards Trump, wielded together by defense attorneys, says the state, to overstate the appeal. Overstated, courts across the nation go to tremendous lengths to keep racial considerations out of the system. Yet it was Willis who welded together this theme by consistently and publicly injecting racism into the case. And they concede Williams' first 2 factors also. The only issue is whether she intentionally injected racism into this case. Of course she did. She's the elected DA of Fulton County. News outlets follow her every move. She intentionally injected false racist claims in a black church before black jurors who were celebrating MLK Jr. blocks away from where he lived his entire life in Fulton County. Yeah, calling, white guys racist, basically there. Seems like that might be forum that message will resonate. Willis calculated and deliberately planned to prejudice Trump and these co-defendants through unethical, racially charged media comments that clearly require her disqualification. Now, given the structural concerns that we've noted already, including the intentional injection of racist comments, this was one of the most severe violations of the rules. Prosecutors don't have carte blanche to engage in improper commentary, and when a lawyer's conduct is inimical to the integrity of the justice system, courts must correct the wrong and send a message that this is not going to be tolerated. Now, they say most respectfully, it is important for the record to reflect that Fani, who is falsely claiming Trump and other appealing defendants are racist, is also black. It's important for the record to know Fani's black. Now, tellingly, the state does not even attempt to respond to Trump's argument that Willis's legally improper speech violated her rules of conduct, because they can't. Significantly, those rules does not sound in actual or even presumed prejudice. Doesn't have anything about prejudice in there. It states a prosecutor, here's the rule for Fani, a prosecutor must refrain from making extrajudicial comments that have a substantial likelihood of heightening public condemnation of the accused. The purpose of the rule is to safeguard the integrity of the system, to guard against prejudice from a prosecutor's out-of-court statements. In today's climate, a widely disseminated statement by Big Fani falsely labeling Trump a racist in a historic black church on MLK's birthday is obviously designed to heighten public condemnation. The rules say you can't do that. Guess what? She did. The mere verbal rebuke of Willis by the trial court, by the judge, McAfee, was utterly insufficient, okay? It demanded disqualification. And that's why we call McAfee a big weenie, because it was pathetic. It happened in his own courtroom, and he just sat there and took it. If prejudice were required, they say the state also ignores that there was pretrial prejudice, by the way, saying that in these other cases, there were improper statements, but even if the court accepts the state's incorrect argument about requiring prejudice, there are reasons fully applicable here. There is pretrial prejudice from the mere presence and the participation of a biased prosecutor. She was a rigged prosecutor. That's prejudice. There's other case law that show that. No more is required from there. But nevertheless, the state says that Williams, that prior case, must have imported its views onto this other case, but there's no evidence that that happened either in that other case. The dissent that they're placing their case on, relying on, is not even any good. Justice Billings used disjunctive phrases permitting disqualification where there's a potential for prejudice, and it's about protecting defendants, and it would not require a showing of actual or likely harm, right? The standard's much lower. Here, even with Hill's reasonable potential for prejudice pretrial standard, it's easily met, even if you use that standard. There was nationwide slanderous media coverage on every network. Appellants have shown that there is not only a real chance, but a suitable probability that there's going to be unfair treatment in the trial process. And Willis placed herself within two disqualification categories proposed by the dissent. She was a biased prosecutor, and she was a prosecutor with personal financial political interest. Those are big problems. Unlike the distinction in other cases, Willis was engaged in a re-election campaign when she made her speech, when she participated in the book Find Me the Votes, when she testified and lied unprofessionally in court. She's repeatedly commented to the media. Willis falsely told churchgoers that Trump was racist and the attorneys were racist. She said, I was doing God's work, that she was acting ethically, and that the allegations against her were untrue. No, they were all true. Willis thereby tied her personal and political interest to these proceedings specifically, and she publicly commented about them too. Now, McAfee found that the effect of Willis's MLK speech was to cast racial aspersions. He said that Big Fani had a stinky odor of mendacity. Woo! Yeah, you can imagine. Lingered over Willis and Wade's disqualification testimony, an odor of mendacity, and that Willis exhibited a tremendous lapse in judgment and acted unprofessionally in court. Then he said, well, it's okay, you can stay on the case, no problem. Willis deliberately chose to, quote, play the race card in a calculated effort to bring public condemnation upon the defendants, to deflect public attention away from herself. Even to this day, Willis shows no remorse. Says, they don't want me to talk about race, but I'm going to talk about it anyways, because the people in Georgia apparently love themselves some more Fani. There is no clear demarcation line between the conflict of interest and forensic misconduct. Now, whether this court focuses on Willis's playing the race card to increase public condemnation, her unprofessionalism, her stinky odor of mendacity, the outcome is the same. Fani must be disqualified. She flagrantly violated the rules of Georgia rules of professional conduct. She did it in a calculated manner, and she did it egregiously. Willis must therefore be disqualified. And so, therefore, President Trump respectfully requests this court to vacate in part the order denying his motion to disqualify the prosecutor and remand this case to the trial court with instructions that this entire indictment be dismissed, gone, or alternatively, that Big Fani Willis and her office be disqualified from further participations in this proceeding. Respectfully submitted by Steve Sadow, defense attorney extraordinaire for President Trump, joined by Jennifer L. Little, shout out, and Matthew K. Winchester, shout out. Nice filing from the team to Big Fani Fani Willis. And so Fani is now going to be having to answer to this in the Georgia Court of Appeals. I do believe there are oral arguments that are scheduled. We'll make sure we have coverage of the next steps here when the time drops. But that is Sadow and Fani fighting for her existence in Georgia. Now we have more coming out of Georgia because there was this from Rahul Bali is now saying that as it pertains to the election, we had a new Georgia decision. A judge says that Robert F. Kennedy, Claudia De La Cruz, and the Georgia Green Party, which nominated Jill Stein, are not going to be on the ballot in Georgia. So election is coming up real soon. Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger is going to make these decisions ultimately, but it looks like we're not going to have Kennedy or some of these other people on the ballots in Georgia, which will be curious to see how this continues on now that Kennedy is getting off the ticket in some of those swing states, Georgia being one of those. So when the election comes, will Georgians vote for Trump, or will they vote for the candidate that met with Big Fani Willis, which will be the Kamala Harris people at the White House? We'll see. Now, Trump was out there today. Trump was out and about. He was at a Vietnamese restaurant hanging out with this guy called Hung Cao from this Vietnamese restaurant. This is a sight to see. Trump making the rounds, hanging out, making America great again.
You know, somehow, I don't know what it is, you'll have to explain it, but the Vietnamese community loves me and I love them. It's been very special. In Florida, we go down, we have large groups of people, always dressed perfectly with the red and the silver. I said, you're the most beautiful dressers I've ever seen. But it's a great honor to be with you, and congratulations on your success. Tremendously successful woman, right? So congratulations, and it's really an honor to be with you. Thank you. And we're going to be with this man. This is a great gentleman. I love his name, Hung Cao. I love that name. And that name alone should get you elected, right?
Yes, sir. That's a good name.
More importantly,
nice, strong name.
Actually, he's tremendous. He ran a great primary campaign. I endorsed him very early, and he did very well. And we think he's got a very good chance of winning for the Senate. And I really believe it. I hope your community gets out and really supports him like 100%, because you can win, definitely win. Yep. And we're looking to win the state, and I think we will win the state. We're looking at polls that are showing us with a lead in the state, which is traditionally not necessarily for Republicans, but not the average Republican.
Exactly, sir.
And neither are you. And so, please, would you like to say a few words?
Dạ, xin chào quý vị. Cảm ơn quý vị tới đây bữa nay có một sự hãnh diện để represent người Mỹ gốc Việt. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. I'm so honored to represent the Vietnamese American community. Next year is the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon, and we'll have the first Vietnamese American U.S. Senator on the anniversary. So, thank you for coming.
All right, so Trump.
What you just said is actually very important, the first, and you should be the first, and it's time that you had somebody. So
all right, let's go. Trump hanging out with our friends from Vietnam, and we've got some other updates in Georgia. You can see Trump is doing some campaigning. We also had a new campaign ad which dropped. This one was clipped over from End Wokeness, and he shared this was a nice video ad that just came out from the Trump team, I do believe, and paid for by Donald Trump. It's showing Kamala Harris having a difficult time debating against herself. Oh.
Everyday prices are too high. Food, rent, gas, back to school clothes. That is called Bidenomics. A loaf of bread costs 50% more today. Ground beef is up almost 50%. There's not much left at the end of the month. Bidenomics is working. The price of housing has gone up. It feels so hard to just be able to get ahead. And we are very proud of Bidenomics.
All right, so nice ad from the Trump team. It's Kamala versus herself. And here's some more from this Vietnamese event where Trump is asked about the upcoming debate. We talked about this morning on our Membos Only stream on YouTube and on Locals when we're talking about 2024 stuff, a bunch of stuff that we can't get to here. We've been talking about it in the mornings for our Membos. But a big kerfuffle's happening right now about the debate because Kamala is trying to change the rules. Remember, she came down and criticized Trump when he said, wait a minute, I already agreed to a debate with Joe Biden. And they said, what's the difference? So shut up and come over to ABC and talk to George Slopadopoulous with us. And then he said, okay, fine, relax, lunatics. Fine, we'll come do the debate. It's fine. Then she says, we're going to change all the rules. And then her reaction is when Trump says, you can't change the rules. They said, well, we never made a deal with you in the first place. That was Biden's deal. So they're like children, basically, who don't even remember what they said minutes ago. But I think we know the truth here. Kamala Harris can't debate. She can't talk in an impromptu manner. If she could, then she would have done it already. But she can't, so she doesn't. And every day that goes by, it's just going to make it that much more awkward when she has to come out and actually talk to somebody. And rumors are that she's going to sit down with her governor pal, Walz, and Megyn Kelly had a great line on this, said that Kamala's going to sit down with her emotional support governor, I think was the line. Her emotional support governor, which is just great. That's why she's Megyn Kelly, obviously. So here's Trump, got asked about it. Here's his response to the debate. Kamala's dumb. She's just not going to show up, obviously.
Do you still plan to participate in the ABC debate?
Well, you know, I watched this weekend, and it's the worst of all networks. George Slopadopoulos and all of the different people, and the worst. And they had this Jonathan Karl, who's a lightweight, and he was asking questions of Tom Cotton, who was fantastic, by the way. Only a total pro could have gotten through that interview. And I watched that group talk up to Biden about vanilla ice cream, and then I watched the way they went after Tom Cotton, and then Tom Cotton handled it like easy. When you see the level of hatred in that room, and when you see Jonathan Karl, who's terrible, I mean, he's just terrible. He's just an average person. But they tell him what to do. And then when you look at the roundtable they had, which was Donna Brazile, wasn't she the one that gave Hillary Clinton the questions when she was at CNN? Maybe?
Yeah, the fake questions.
Right?
It's all rigged.
And Donna Brazile gave the questions. You know that, right? That was her. I'm looking. I said, I haven't seen her in a long time. But she's the one that gave the questions to a debate for Hillary Clinton, Crooked Hillary. And when I look at that, and I looked at, there was some other, a blonde woman, I have no idea who she was. The level of hostility was incredible. And Reince was in there, but he was a little bit softer than he should be, to be honest with you. But when I looked at the hostility of that, I said, why am I doing it? Let's do it with another network. I want to do it. You know, I won because of debates. Ask Biden. But I won because of debates. I want to do debates. But the head of ABC is her comrade's best friend. You know that, right? They like the husbands and the whole thing. What kind of a deal is that? I want to have a fair debate. And you know, they can ask me tough questions. I don't mind. I think I've heard them all from you. I hear them every day.
That's the nice
But
thing
I
about
think it's
practice.
very unfair. The single worst network for unfairness, I think, worse than CNN, worse than NBC, which is really hard to believe. And CBS is probably the best of the group. Fox is the best of the other side. So as to your question, I think it's disgraceful. And I think ABC is a disgrace. I think having Donna Brazile sitting on that panel, and she's the one that gave the answers and the questions to Hillary Clinton before a debate, I think ABC is really should be shut out. I'd much rather do it on NBC. I'd much rather do it on CBS, frankly. I think CBS is very unfair, but the best of the group. And certainly I'd do it on Fox. I'd even do it on CNN. I thought CNN treated us very fairly the last time. I think Jake Tapper was very fair and Dana Bash was very fair. When I watched this interview of Tom Cotton, fortunately he's a total pro. He knows what he's doing. And then when I watched the roundtable after that, I said the hostility is crazy. So we're thinking about it. They also want to change the rules. You know, the deal was we keep the same rules. Now all of a sudden they want to make a change in the rules.
Yeah, how come? Because they want to
Because she can't answer questions. Why doesn't she do a couple of question answer? Why doesn't she do something like I'm doing right now? She can't talk. We can't have another dummy as a president.
No.
Okay, we cannot have a dummy.
No, we already had
and the
3.5
people
years.
from Vietnam agree with that. Okay.
Would you want the microphones muted in the debate whenever you're not speaking?
We agreed to the same rules. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. I'd rather have it probably on. But the agreement was that it would be the same as it was last time. In that case, it was muted. I didn't like it the last time, but it worked out fine. Ask Biden how it worked out. It was fine.
It was great.
And I think it should be the same. We agreed to the same rules. Same rules and same specifications.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what it should be. The truth is they're trying to get out of it.
Yeah,
Because
obviously.
she doesn't want to debate. She's not a good debater. She's not a smart person.
No.
She doesn't want to debate.
No.
But when I looked at the hostility during the weekend, you watch it. This week with George Slopadopoulos, and the Vietnamese didn't get that one. You got it, right? Yes, sir. If you didn't get it, I couldn't put any questions. But no, we want to have fairness. We have to bring fairness back to the country.
All right, so yeah, and if Kamala has a problem with anything that Trump is saying, then she can just come out and talk to the media too, okay? She can go out, get a little autograph book, and go hang out with some other people and just explain it to the media. But she can't do it because she's Kamala Harris. She's a fake candidate who was promoted and created because they were tired of Joe Biden. She's the only thing they have left. And so they're making her into something that they want her to be. But truth will be revealed. She can't hide who she is forever. Maybe she can. They'll try. But we're going to be here to continue to expose her. And we're liking that Trump every day is out there rubbing her face in it. She could come out and talk. What is it? Day 35? Day 36? Day 37? Clock keeps ticking. Kamala keeps hiding. We're going to be here to continue to cover this, my friends. Thank you for joining us as we do. Don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We'd love it if you did. We're super close to that big number. That's a lot of fun. We're excited about that. Thanks for helping us get there. We, of course, are going to be back here for more live streams, and we'll look forward to seeing you both back here on the next one.